Is there anything that you see or understand or can educate us on between the link between that and think tanks that the Atlas Network may or may not be involved with, or think tanks in general?
Yeah, well, look, I have to be a little careful here because I'm certainly not an expert on the constitutional law and procedures of your country. I would highly recommend you get some people on who are expert in that. But I'd say what's happening is that you've had this whole, so what, if we go back to, 2019, 2020, where you've got this whole, taxpayers union supporting this reaction from below and quite deliberately cultivating the anti-vaxxers. So people who are, are not scientifically, perhaps scientifically literate, who are demonstrably vulnerable to disinformation, and then creating a movement in some ways that wasn't there before, perhaps, or catalyzing that anger and focusing it and giving it a name and giving it targets and driving it along. So you already had this reaction, which probably wasn't there before, of people that suddenly it's okay to say we hate Te Reo Maori, and suddenly it's okay to, say, oh, we need to be equal and Maori have too many rights or whatever. And, and then they managed to attach to that anger, oh, electric cars, ute tax as well. Because they find anger.
Yeah.
And then they'll attach the things that they really want to that anger.
Yeah.
So here in Australia, it's like, oh, trans people in women's sport, but then they'll link that to, oh, and, the people, eventually you'll see them linking that back to, oh, woke solar panels, whatever, So they'll use they'll figure out to take that anger that's been cultivated in one issue and attach it to another one. But certainly that audience was there. But just to get really to your question, you've got someone in with what I believe 8% of the vote wanting to overturn the Constitution of New Zealand.
They wouldn't say it like that. But as I said, if you're going to change the principles of the treaty, that's basically how the treaty is to be used.
Well,
I agree with you. I agree with you. That's what they're.
Are they asking iwi about that? Are they asking Maori leaders if they want this discussion? Are they including them?
No. And this is something we talk about a lot on this show, so we don't need to kind of go into it now. But it's very clear to me that if you've got a contract between two people, one group can't then just decide that everything's going to change. You have to do it, both signatories to the agreement have to go, okay, let's make up some new rules around our thing. And it's not even one signatory. It's actually it's one slice of the pie of one signatory, because only one party, maybe two, are asking for this, and combined they make up.
Before, where does it come from? I mean, you may know that better than me, but I mean, where has this story about the treaty's ruining everything? We've got to modify it. So, I mean,
where is it coming from? I mean, I don't want to be flippant, and I don't want to be flippant and make it a too easy, overreaching answer. But racism. I mean, people think. I mean, it's that old adage of, for people who have power, equality feels like oppression. So when you're being told you guys have had it pretty good for the last 170 years, and the other half of this agreement are in the worst statistical position of every metric in society, maybe we need to do something to make this more equal. What they think is, why should they get special privileges? And it's like, well, hang on, if Māori have all these special privileges and they're all getting these things that no one else is getting, why are they the bottom of every social statistic that we have? I mean, if I had all the privileges in the world, I don't think I'd be at the bottom of any social stats. I think I'd be at the top. So, and I think there's countries have
more so in Australia, like the same, we had this, and it was very interesting to me because they settled on one line. There's a very interesting article on the Centre for Independent Studies website by Warren Mundine, who's been cultivated as the sort of indigenous face of the neoliberal think tank work. But, obviously people don't know. So people see this guy on TV, Aboriginal guy on TV, saying, oh, we don't want this voice. We don't want this makarata. We don't want the things that have been called for out of a 5-year-long process of a national constitutional convention involving 260 Aboriginal nations, Torres Strait Islander nations, judges, historians, all coming together to agree what they want to ask of the Australian people in the Parliament. one fella gets up there and says, no, Aboriginal people don't want these. And he, on the Centre for Independent Studies website, quite explicitly said, a voice in Parliament, if there was a body within the Parliament of, elected First Nations leaders who were there only to speak with no, unlike, you've got Maori seats in Parliament, they have voting rights, there's nothing like that was proposed here. But even that was too much. And he said quite explicitly on the website of the Centre for Independent Studies, which was founded by Santos, Shell, Rio, BHP, and is very quiet about their current funding, Aboriginal people will speak up against, specifically the Adani coal mine, James Price Point gas hub, and the Beetaloo Basin gas. And he quite explicitly says that. But then when they set up another organisation called, or repurposed a sort of dormant letterbox address called Advance Australia, which then was renamed Fair Australia, and then they came out with all of this stuff about how it's unfair and it's unfair that Aboriginal people, the position of Indigenous Australians is far worse when it comes to incarceration, poverty, lack of land ownership, all of those things, lack of voice, violence, but then they created this whole story about how it was unequal. And I was fascinated to see that exactly the same lines that was being run by this, front for the Atlas called Advance Australia, then immediately appeared on the ACT website on the same day as the referendum was defeated here.
Wow.
I saw the ACT website saying we need to end division by race.
Yeah, and this is something, and I don't know if it's the same as you feel in Australia, but this is something, the ending division by race, that is David Seymour's catchphrase, right? Now,
exactly.
The problem, yeah, but the problem with that, the easy, and look, I've asked them to come on, and they won't come on my little pissant show. I don't know why, but maybe it's because of this.
I've asked them questions.
Is because he doesn't want equality based on any other protected class. He doesn't want equality based on sex, or based on age, or based on religion, or based on, all these things that are human rights protected class.
Well,
he only wants what he described as equality based on race. So we talk about this a lot. We're like, okay, so David, if you go and get equality for everything, you'd feel more authentic. So therefore, no more of those special car parks for the disabled people, because it's, there's a thing. No more only male priests for the Catholic Church. It's discrimination based on sex because of religious beliefs, because you can't do that. So if we're going to have equality, call for equality, but they're not. They're calling for equality only around race, and it's race baiting and feeding their base and getting them in, and it's dipping into that, the racist underbelly of a sector of society and getting them votes.
Yeah, and that's quite true. But they'll also be far more sophisticated than this. Because here in Australia, they had a whole story that was pitched at, your traditional Anglo racists, but they were always going to vote against it anyway.
Yeah.
But what was much more interesting was how they managed to convince people that wanted to do the right thing by First Nations to vote against it. That was far more interesting to me because, and again, they used things like they had one group which was set up by, it was called Recognise a Better Way. And again, it was all people with backgrounds in the Centre for Independent Studies or the Institute of Public Affairs or other organisations from the past they'd set up to block the advance of Aboriginal land rights movement. One was called the Bennelong Society, where they cultivated black voices to attack legitimate black community leaders. And all of these figures turn up again, and then they're saying, one group was saying, oh no, the voice proposal is just not enough. Aboriginal people deserve better. We should vote no now in hope of getting something better in the future. That persuaded a lot of people. You have a black person saying that on TV.
That's interesting, though, because at the moment, David Seymour's got an agreement from his coalition partners to go to a first reading. But the first time I've thought about this, there was enough input, outside voices, outside pressure to get the voice flipped. And all really David Seymour and his ilk need to do is flip National, like our biggest political party. They need to flip the people, and they get to a second reading. And our Prime Minister is very careful with the words he's been choosing. He has ruled out supporting it once or twice, but normally he say things like, we don't want to support it past the first reading. We go, yeah, but we do lots of things we don't want to, Mr. Luxon. Just because you're saying we don't want to support it doesn't mean you're not going to. And we've been saying for a long time on this show, I don't know if it's the same in Australia, but we have a thing called a conscience vote, where the political parties give the right to their MPs to vote as their conscience would, not on party lines. and we're still asking that question, could it be turned into a conscience vote? Then Nationals not supporting it, just all their MPs are. So we're still wondering about that. But when you say that the voice was flipped, which is obviously what happened, that makes me think for the first time, yeah, so if they can flip just the National Party, not population yet, then they could put this through.